And Elise, tell me how to pronounce your name.
Ilse.
Ilsa, it's so great to see you. We're so glad you could be here.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Um, Welcome to the 9:30 call. As folks are joining, we sent the email out on Friday. You saw our lineup for the week. So we know on Thursday the commissioner is coming. Commissioner Kershaw is coming from EEC. We will have Excel linguistics with live translation for Spanish and English and Portuguese. So hopefully folks can join us and please spread the word. The commissioner comes on the 9:30 call once a month. And so she'll be giving a share out from the November board meeting and then any other updates. So Ilse, if you have slides, you can share your screen. And our first question that we ask all 9:30 callers is for you to tell us a little bit about you, to be in your current role, and then we're excited to hear your update.
Perfect. Thanks, Amy. Um, I feel like I got into this role, maybe not in the most exciting way as others have shared in the past, but I went for undergrad to Holy Cross. I know there's lots of people from Worcester on this call. So Cross undergrad, and you had to take a language. So I chose sign language because I thought it'd be fun. And that's how then I took lots of classes around like deaf culture and the deaf community and just, learning more about that. So right after I graduated, I started working at Perkins, which is a school for the blind, in case anyone's not familiar. Um, and so the very first student I was given was a completely deaf-blind student, and I knew about, I knew a little about deafness, knew nothing about blindness, and just was completely fascinated. So now I've been at Perkins for 15 years, and currently I am the senior director of the CVI Center. So if anyone, again, is not quite as familiar with Perkins, it's an actual school. So students can be there either day students or residential, depending just on their needs. And then we also have other departments that are supporting our on-campus students, but also supporting external students. So the CVI Center is one of those departments. And now
And what
feeling
age are the students?
on campus, Amy.
Yes.
3 to 22. We do have
Okay.
an infant toddler
Wow.
program that I'll talk about in a little bit as well. So we serve the students in Massachusetts. Anyone 0 to 3 who has some vision needs, it's Perkins that serves them. We're the only contract with it. I don't think we have any competition. We're the only contract with the state to serve all 0 to 3. Again, that just for vision services. So we're part of then the EI team.
Oh, great.
Once they're on campus, 3 to 22.
And we already have in chat, Carrie Perry shares, my daughter is at Cross taking American Sign Language. It's a game changer.
Tell her to come to Perkins after.
Okay. Great. Thank you so much. We love this question because we do, I mean, everyone's story of how they got to where they are is always interesting, including yours. So thank you so much.
Of course, of course. All right, so slowly over time, I started learning, first again, deafness, then more ocular visual impairments and how to support students that way. And then about 10 years ago, we had a training on campus around CVI, which is Cerebral Cortical Visual Impairment. And once I learned about CVI, I mean, boom, like that's all I've done ever since. It's just the most fascinating thing to me. So, for just a very brief, non-sciencey version of how we all see, because that'll help explain what CVI is. We all, I have my tumbler in front of me, for example. My eye sees that. It takes that kind of image, of photograph, if you will, to the back of your brain, to the visual cortex. And there, the visual cortex kind of disperses a little bit, like one VI, V2. They figure out shape, color, depth, all of that. It gets sent to more the middle of your brain, called the temporal lobe, where you have all of your kind of stored memory. So it rifles through all these images, if you will, of things I've seen in the past. And even if, for all of you, if you've never seen this specific tumbler before, you've seen so many other tumblers, that information gets sent back to the eye. And from the moment I've held up the tumbler, you could have recognized it almost simultaneously to seeing, like seeing and recognition is simultaneous for, there's a slight delay that we don't even realize. For our students with CVI, they might be able to see the tumbler, but it's those pathways from the eye to the brain that are having trouble communicating. So any kind of brain damage that happened in the brain, usually right around birth, but it can happen later on. But if there was kind of a lack of oxygen at birth, a stroke, something that, again, created some kind of damage to those neural pathways from the eye to the brain, that's when CVI can happen. So again, they might be able to look, but it's that recognition piece that's a lot harder. And unfortunately, a lot of our students also have on top of their CVI an ocular visual impairment. So even the image that they're getting is already, say, a more blurry image or, however they're impacted with CVI, then it's even harder. So even if maybe many of you on the call have never heard about CVI, it is the leading cause of visual impairment in all developed countries and soon to be, less developed countries as well, because we are saving babies more and more in hospitals, which is a wonderful, wonderful thing. But for those who had some kind of, kind of traumatic event during birth, for example, those babies are now surviving with all the great hospitals we have. So we're going to keep seeing a rise of CVI. So it's already the leading cause. You're going to see more and more about it. All right. I have two images, just the next couple slides are just images to kind of show how much work our students with CVI are doing. And even if you've never heard of CVI, I promise you have come across someone with CVI. So this will hopefully, be as fascinating to you as it is for me. So these slides, even if you look at just the top row, there's different heat maps. So where the red is where your eyes will look more if you're wearing kind of an eye tracking device. So top left picture, for example, is two individuals sitting on stairs. There's a building in the background. The control group, so anyone without CVI and without an ocular, so any kind of visual impairment, will look mostly at the two people's faces sitting up. And, that's the most important thing in that image for us. Students with CVI have a much harder time figuring out what's important. So their heat map is quite literally all over the place. So they're seeing, they might look at one person's head, but for the rest, the heat map is more absorbed in the background, like the building. So our students with CVI are just doing a lot more work to figure out what it is that they're looking at. They have a much harder time kind of perceiving images like that. And I have one quote on the screen from Nye, who's an adult with CVI, and they said, "Vision use is not passive, it's hard, grueling, tiring work." I have one more just image to kind of, because you can't simulate CVI, so at least I have some images. This is by a fantastic neuro researcher, Lotfi Merabet, works at Mount Sinai. And he does functional MRIs. They're called fMRIs, if anyone's familiar, where they can light up the pathways in the brain. Super fascinating if you like that kind of thing like I do. So the left-hand image is a control group. Again, someone who does not have any vision impairment. So not CVI, but also not an ocular visual impairment. So, most of the people on this call, I would assume, and your neural pathways are strong. You have tons and tons of neural pathways. Your brain can easily communicate from one portion of your brain to the other. Again, it's easy for you to look and recognize things. For a student with CVI, their neural pathways are a lot more sparse and a lot weaker. So it's just scientifically hard for their brain to communicate, again, from the eye to the brain, but even from one portion of the brain to the other portion. So it's just a lot harder work for our students with CVI to, again, recognize things around them. All right. Common associated conditions, just because we probably all, again, know individuals with some of these conditions. So cerebral palsy is the top co-occurring condition. In the UK, I believe it is, if a child is born with cerebral palsy, you have to prove that they don't have CVI. It's an automatic assumption that that individual will also have CVI. So we don't have a ton of research on statistics, so here's just some. 60 to 70% of those with cerebral palsy also have CVI. It's about, there's only 2 research studies, so hopefully more coming out soon. About 40% of those with Down syndrome also have CVI. Again, not a lot of research, but the little research we has, there's correlation with autism and CVI, that those can co-occur together, and lots more. Just wanted to show that there's a long list. Here's another just common causes. I'm not going to read the list, but just for you to know, there's many red flags that lead to CVI. So if someone is, for example, in early intervention on this call and they get, your next case file, if you look at the file review and you see some of these, you just might want to be aware of CVI and get someone in there to look. Okay. And again, won't read all this, but just know the vast students with CVI also have an ocular impairment. So if you have someone who has an ocular condition, but because I should have mentioned how CVI is diagnosed, it can be very hard to diagnose because not every doctor knows about CVI. But the way that it is diagnosed is if your clinical eye exam, the way that we all go to the doctor and we get tested with acuity and things like that, your clinical eye exam doesn't equate with how functionally a child is able to use their vision. So we've had students, for example, with 20/20 acuity, but they have a hard time recognizing what, their materials or who's sitting right next to them. Like it doesn't equate with a clinical eye exam, that clinical vision versus your functional vision. But again, many of our students also have ocular, but if you're seeing an ocular visual impairment and you're like, ooh, maybe something else is going on, just wanted you to know that CVI also exists. That's another thing you might want to consider. Okay, quick review of what CVI is ever in your lifetime. The way that we describe CVI at Perkins is something called the 16 visual behaviors. So now I have a 4x4 chart here, one square each for each of those 16 visual behaviors. And around that chart is what we're thinking about compensatory skills. So all the other senses and strategies our students are using. So it might be hard for them. I had a student who could recognize their pastor at church, and his mom, this student was verbal, so mom was able to ask, you usually have a really hard time recognizing people. How are you able to always know who the pastor is, even when the pastor is just walking along in the congregation, not up at the front of the church? And the student said, well, he has a much forehead than any man in the church. So they're picking up all these cues and strategies, but that's also why a lot of our students kind of fall through the cracks because, like, oh, he's recognizing people, he's
Right.
fine, without realizing like all the tricks and all the work that's going into that recognition. Um, let's see, I could talk lots about all this, but we have links to everything, I promise. Okay, so I just want to have lots of time for questions. So when to suspect CVI, if anything is, and I know this is the quickest overview, not anything for any students you're seeing or patients or etc. We have other resources as well on what you might want to suspect CVI, but again, it's that recognition piece that can be really hard. So recognizing their materials in front of them, being able to kind of visually take in the layout of a room, especially if it's unfamiliar. Relying more on the sound of someone's voice, for example, to recognize the person, than being able to visually recognize them, even if it's a very familiar person. Like I've had, again, lots of parents tell me if they go to the grocery store, the student is likely to go up to other men in jeans and a baseball cap because that's what dad wears. So, like, even someone familiar, they're using those other cues to recognize. So that big recognition piece, is really difficult. Summary. See, there's no cure for CVI, but we can then individually assess that student to know what kind of strategies and accommodations they need. So that's really the goal with getting a diagnosis, is just to make sure then that that student has the support and the services and the accommodations they need, especially going into school, of course. So again, we it is underdiagnosed. We think about less than 14% of those with CVI actually have a diagnosis in the United States, just with some work we've done. Um, so we're the National Eye Institute now put CVI as their number one priority. I know they're having some funding difficulties, but once that's maybe taken care of, CVI is going to be back at their forefront. And one of their goals is to make a CVI registry, which will really help us to better understand the prevalence of CVI in the United States and ideally get a medical code for CVI. So it becomes more well known. Maybe insurance can cover some things, etc. But most of this is just the school should, of course, take care of. Um, a vision specialist working with that child, etc. Every person with CVI is impacted differently. So there's no kind of one size fits all in terms of strategies. Again, that's why we really need that assessment piece. And in the last 5 years, but especially the last year, I mean, every single week I'm getting a Google Scholar alert for another research coming out about CVI. So huge influx of research, which is wonderful. We're learning more and more about it and how our students can be impacted. Last overview slide is, or a couple last overview slides are just more resources because there's no way I can describe CVI in a 30-minute call. But we have a whole website. CVI.org is our website at Perkins, hundreds of articles on there. We have Facebook groups for like parents of children with CVI or educators working with kids with CVI. So two different Facebook groups there. We have a free one-on-one call if anyone, if you ever have a parent or someone curious and sources is wondering if, does this even sound like CVI? Should I even ask for an evaluation? Anything like that, they can contact us. We have articles on, CVI and autism, CVI and epilepsy, just anything, or communication systems for individuals with CVI. For educators, we also have specific articles per discipline. So if you're a BCBA, what should a BCBA know about CVI? What should an OT know about CVI? An SLP, again, the whole gamut. And then lastly, just because I would be remiss working at Perkins if I didn't mention that we also have other departments aside from my personal favorite, the CVI Center. So we have an infant toddler program. I'll put all these links in the chat in a second, unless you've already done it, Amy. I'm not looking at the chat right now, but an infant toddler program for, again, 0 to 3, where we'd go into, just like early intervention, go into the home, work with the EI teams, all of that. We also have play groups on campus so that then the parents can meet, and the kids can meet other, kiddos with a visual impairment, and the parents I think it's a 2-hour play group. So the parents stay for a while with the kids and learn some of the strategies that we're presenting, but then the parents leave to just have their parent group and, vent or learn about other resources or anything that the parent needs. Then once they're 3 on, we also have itinerant teachers that drive around to different schools because ideally, of course, not every student needs to come to Perkins to get services if they can stay in their own public schools. That's great. So some public schools have their own vision specialists, of course, but they can continue to contract out with Perkins as well. And then another department that we have is a library that's available for kids and adults, of course, but it has, if you want some talking books or just some other ways that books, music, etc., could be more accessible. Even if you have like a grandfather who wants some more audiobooks, just there's a link there
Right.
for Perkins Library as well. I'll stop sharing so I can actually look at the.
I can also, so thank you so much. I think it's so, I'm so glad that you're here, and just to share the information. So many folks on this call are working, directly with children and families and, trying to have around child development. There's so much happening. So one of the questions in chat is, seems like pediatricians should be looking out for this since the diagnosis and signs are complex. What might that look like to implement even as a pilot to start? So that was one question. And then the other question that came through was how would families in Western Mass be able to access
Hmm,
Perkins's services?
perfect. Um, for the pediatricians, let's see, we're slowly filtering out. Right now, we're doing a lot of work with specifically ophthalmologists and optometrists to make sure that because they're usually the key people to diagnose CVI. We want pediatricians to be aware to then send a referral. Pediatricians could diagnose, but I've never seen that on any of my students' case files,
I see. Okay.
um, so we're trying, but ophthalmologists and optometrists, they're like two different breeds. So they have two different national conferences, for example. So we're trying to be kind of very specific on how we're able to collaborate and get out
Mm,
there. We're doing a lot of work with specific different disability communities. So like the CP Foundation, and then getting the information there that then can spread to other patients. We've been doing some collaboration with different just medical providers. Like my colleague Lacey is helping with a research study at Brigham and Women's around and like getting CVI on the radar for the NICU. They're doing a whole study on
right. Interesting.
getting NICUs in. So pediatricians 100%. It's a little trickier than than we have to like get to
Hmm.
each group of people. So we're trying to, yeah, kind of slowly filter our way to pediatricians as well. Ideally, just at least be aware so that they can,
Sure.
refer. So there are some CVI screeners, for example, that don't die, but just, should this even be on the radar, that we hope pediatricians could start adopting more. And then for Western Mass, many of our services are like I know that we have some Perkins teachers in Western Massachusetts. Again, it all depends
Great.
on, um, if your school, if they're school age already, if your school has their own TVI, teacher of students with visual impairments or not. For EI, we're in Western Mass. Of course, we're all over Massachusetts. And then other things like the Perkins Library or any CVI resource, like almost everything we have is virtual. You don't need to come to campus to get any of that. Um, and I know this is an early childhood group. We also, if you're working with a whole range of students, we also have a whole transition center on students like from high school, that are leaving high school, graduating high school soon, around anyone with visual impairment, multiple disabilities, CVI included, and what kind of services they might provide. And most of that is of course virtual as well. So you rarely need to come to Perkins to get a service unless the student is attending
That's
Perkins.
cool. And then so when you think about child development and before three, then after three, and so many of our folks are filling in so many of the gaps. Kind of how do you kind of work? You talked a little bit about early intervention, but can you talk a little bit more about what that looks like?
For when we have the zero
Yeah,
to
like how
three
your
vision
work.
services.
Yeah,
Yes, perfect. So I used to be an infant toddler, TVI, which was wonderful until they said I needed to be only school age. And but I just love the little ones because then you get to go into the home and you get to talk to
right,
the family. So even for 0 to 3, we would do an evaluation regardless if the student is diagnosed with CVI or not. We can always evaluate for CVI, at least to get some more information for the medical provider to better understand some functional vision, but more for the parents to also know what kind of accommodations can we implement. Regardless if they end up getting a diagnosis or not, these
right,
accommodations will always be helpful. And there's very simple things that we can do in the home. If so, a lot of our students have difficulty with clutter. So if you put an item on top of those beautiful, colorful play mats, for example, that kids have,
right,
it can be harder for the student to locate that item. And then, if they can't locate it, they can't touch it and interact with it and learn about it. So even getting a more simple, play mat and a lot of our students also have difficulty with contrast. So they need things at a brighter contrast. So if you have, like usually a more black or dark blue. I know that
Right.
doesn't sound enticing, but even you can keep your colorful playmat. And then if you want your child to really be able to interact and look at things, then just put, a towel over it for a moment or a tablecloth. And then those can be the times where you're doing more, I don't know, like vision stimulation work. I don't know if that
Yeah.
makes sense. And then for the rest, when the child's just kind of roaming around free play, keep your colorful playmat again. So little things like that are all very doable, but it can help the student, it can help make a big difference in being able to for the student to or that child to find things.
Right. I added all the links and we did record the call, so we'll post this in our 9:30 call follow-up folder. And then if you send me the slides, we'll add that. We have the slides from 5+ years of the 9:30 call on our in our Google Drive. And I guess would invite you to come back anytime. I think this has been an incredible community of sharing information, of learning. I certainly learned something today, which is always so exciting when you have that opportunity in the 9:30 call. And your colleagues too, if there are any other kind of areas that would be helpful for folks to hear more about, please join us here on the call.
That's great. Yeah, let me know. I have other departments too. But if, like you said, more specifically, you're interested in like how to help, how to figure out kind of how to make the home more accessible. Like any
Right,
specific
right.
topics, let me know because then I can just gear towards that. Yeah.
Edna shared, "Hi, I will have to listen to this recorded call with my full attention. This information you shared and what I was able to hear is so important to share with our group of educators. Thank you for your enthusiasm and your work." Lots of appreciation in the chat.
Thank you
Thank you
all.
so much for joining us, Ilsa. I also added the link for the 9:30 call this week. We have the 9:30 call on Wednesday night in Espanol, which is a 9:30 call completely in Spanish with our host Harold and Paula and Neri. So please join. That's at 6:30 on Wednesday night, and then we'll be here in the morning the rest of the week. Thank you so much for joining us, and we will see you tomorrow. Have a good day.
Thank
Thanks so
you.
much.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.